Hello everyone, FPL GW2 here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my transfer plans for Game Week 2. This is a weekly series I do where I go through my initial thoughts in reaction to the previous Game Week and discuss some early strategies ahead of the upcoming one. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you are new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, if you are new to the channel, firstly, welcome. But this is a weekly series that I upload every Sunday or Monday where I review the previous game week, take a look at some interesting stats from that game week as well, look at my team selection for the upcoming game week, and also maybe plan ahead with my transfers and my watch list as well. And if that sounds like something that would be useful and entertaining to you, please do consider liking the video, but more importantly, subscribing as well. So, I've obviously just watched the Manchester City-Chelsea game. I'm recording this immediately after to upload for you. And so everything's very raw, and I might get a few things wrong, but that's what we like about these videos. So honestly, Game Week 1 has gone pretty perfect for me. I mean, nothing can ever go fully perfect, but it's gone much better than I probably thought it would. I knew I took a massive risk going without Haaland, and it's definitely not paid off yet because Game Week 2 is the really scary one. But so far, the team has done very well. Saturday was unbelievable for my team. Sunday, not so much, but it couldn't have gone much, but I actually had a full house on Saturday. So I had 3 Liverpool players and 2 Arsenal, and obviously all of them returned. Starting with Liverpool, I was really worried in that first half because Liverpool often start games really slowly under Klopp, and that appeared to be the case once again. I wouldn't say they were bad by any means, but Ipswich were definitely holding their own, and that is largely down to Ipswich, by the way, but also Liverpool just weren't quite clicking. Whatever Slot said at half-time, along with the substitution of bringing in Konate, it clearly worked because they were so dominant in that second half. When we actually look at the stats in a second, the amount of chances they were able to create in that second half was pretty ridiculous. Trent was unbelievable throughout the game. He created so many chances. He came away with an 8-pointer despite no attacking returns. And whilst I think Robertson was very impressive as well himself, and if he continues to start, I've got my eye on Robertson for 1 million cheaper. Trent just showed why he is worth the 7 million price tag because he could have had a couple of returns himself. We'll see it again in a second. The amount of chances he created, he deserved at least 1 assist. So brilliant performance from him. Jota, I actually would argue, was probably Liverpool's best attacker. He was so good at linking up the play. I think what he brings that someone like Darwin doesn't is that ability to link the midfield and the attack. And I thought Jota was highly impressive throughout. He actually missed a header from a few yards out, which was a Trent assist, or it would have been a Trent assist. So all in all, I thought Jota was highly impressive. And what I like the most about Jota is that when it came for him coming on, when the time came for him to come off, it wasn't that Darwin that came on for him. It was actually Gakpo, who I largely expect to play out on the left. And he got a lot more minutes than I thought. I thought Jota would be subbed at around 60, 65 minutes. So the fact that he stayed on, and when he eventually came off, it wasn't even Darwin that came on. I think Jota could be slightly more now than we thought he might be, which would absolutely be brilliant, obviously, for our teams if we picked him. And then obviously the man that I put all of my faith in was Mohamed Salah. I would say really disappointing in the first half. I was quite worried going into half-time with his performance, and I don't think it was his best game by any means. I think he looked quite sharp at points, but his end product was lacking. But this is Salah. Salah will just find a way to get goals and assists. And in the end, his data was quite impressive. And he did get the chances. He had a volley in the last few minutes as well, which could have gone in. So overall, this is what Salah does. And I didn't really consider this. I'm not going to try and pretend I was some genius. But the changes to the bonus point system is really going to suit Salah, because you get the extra points for fouls won, and Salah does win fouls, but also the extra points for shots on target in the bonus point system. And I think Salah, as a result, along with his increased creativity in recent years, could be fantastic for bonus points. So the 3 of them were brilliant. And obviously Arsenal, I actually said to someone on Saturday after the Arsenal game that it was one of the most predictable results, like 2-0 to Arsenal, completely dominant, getting a clean sheet, getting a couple of goals. You could just see that coming from a mile off against Wolves at home. Now, Wolves did have a couple of chances, and actually David Raya was unbelievably good. So maybe Wolves could have scored in that, but it just felt like such an Arsenal result. Controlled the game, 2-0. Obviously, Gabriel and Saka getting me 18 points. Saka was exceptional. I didn't watch the full game. I watched the highlights, but in the highlights, you could see that he was the one driving that attack. Obviously, Kai Havertz did incredibly well himself, and he is someone that is absolutely on my watch list at the moment because I have 0.5 in the bank. And if Solanke doesn't impress me on Monday, Solanke to Havertz is something that could happen for me because I have that third Arsenal spot open. But largely, Arsenal was so impressive. And this kind of reinforces the fact that I wanted to go into the season with double Arsenal at least, because despite the fixtures, you just expect them to dominate. It was quite frustrating because one of the things that I could have done was Raya and Munoz rather than Henderson and Gabriel. It's exactly the same price, and I discussed in my team selection video that it was something I was thinking about. Obviously, Raya got an 8 point and Munoz got the assist, so They didn't massively outscore Henderson and Gabriel, but in Game Week 1, Raya and Munoz was absolutely the best combination. Hopefully in Game Week 2, it swings back in favour of Gabriel. And he did have a chance in the game as well. So really impressed with those 5 players on Saturday. Obviously, Isak as well was another player that I had. I actually wanted Isak to blank, which I know sounds weird, but amongst engaged managers, most people owned Haaland and captained Isak. So for me, in my mini leagues and also the people that I'm competing against, I actually wanted Isak to blank. I think Newcastle were extremely unlucky that they went down to 10 men so early. I'm not convinced it was a red card, but regardless, that's the way it panned out. I would just comment on the fact that Newcastle were not particularly good up until the red card as well. If you have a look at the stats, if you have a look at the game, Newcastle were struggling a little bit, and Southampton were incredibly impressive, even when it was 11 versus 11. So, yes, Isak captain is very unlucky, but also Newcastle didn't look that impressive overall. Then, obviously, we had, like I said, Henderson conceded. Brentford were good at points. I think Crystal Palace was slightly poorer than I was hoping, but there were also some promising signs. I'm going to try not to sound too salty here, but HAVERTZ Eze was absolutely robbed. If you watch the game, the goal that everyone is going so mad about, he scored a free kick, but because there was a bit of a kerfuffle in the box and one player pushed another or tripped him, the ref blew his whistle immediately as soon as the foul took place, before Eze's shot hit the back of the net or went over the line. And as a result, VAR can't intervene because the whistle has already been blown. Which feels ridiculous, because if the whistle was blown or not, Eze's shot was always going in the goal. So that was very frustrating. There was also a moment where Edouard just needed to stay onside, and he was slid through and he scored, but he just couldn't hold his run. I thought Eze was exceptional. I truly do. I think his performance was so impressive. So he is a player that I'm absolutely happy owning, but very frustrating that he only got 2 points. And then just to finish up with NKUNKU, 1 point. Probably the most disappointing player in the team. I did not expect his minutes to be managed like that. I'm hoping that it was just because it was Man City and Maresca saw something, but I thought Jackson was significantly poorer than NKUNKU. I actually thought NKUNKU showed some bright moments, but his end product was definitely lacking. So I can understand the sub, but in my head, NKUNKU was a little bit more nailed on than that. So let's see what happens in Game Week 2. But he is definitely a player that's on the chopping block. So there it is. Obviously, Robinson looked very impressive on the bench as well. So did Greaves, by the way. Got on the end of a few set pieces against Liverpool. So let's see how he looks in future weeks. But I'm very happy to be on 72 points from 9 players, to have Porro and Solanke left to play as well. Hopefully we can go 80 points plus. And obviously Erling Haaland getting 7 points. He could have had more, but he also could have had less as well. And it's one of those where I expect Haaland to return every single week. And if you're saying you should own him as a result, my point has always been, even if Haaland returns every week, my team can still outscore him, right? Because I'm able to choose more expensive players in the surrounding positions. What it comes down to is captaincy. As long as Salah can get close to Haaland most weeks, not every week, but most weeks, and as long as my surrounding players do very well, I can go against Haaland. So for the time being, I've got no plans to bring him in. Obviously, I'm very scared ahead of Game Week 2, which we'll discuss in a second. But yeah, that's the way the team performed. I would love to know down below in the comments, how many points have you scored for Game Week 1 and how many players do you have left to play? Let's take a look at some interesting stats now that I found in Game Week 1. So guys, let's take a look at some interesting stats from Game Week 1. And as we get throughout the season, sometimes I'll change this to look at interesting stats from the last 3 to 5 game weeks, the last 10 game weeks, because one game week is such a small sample size that it almost doesn't matter. But it is quite fun to just look at which players performed well. So only 3 players managed more than 1 XG in Game Week 1, and those players were Matoma, Souček, and Bruno Fernandes. If you watch Manchester United's game against Fulham, Bruno Fernandes owners can feel incredibly unlucky because Bruno himself, I wouldn't say he's an elite finisher, but he does often finish his chances, and he had 2 absolutely massive chances that, in all fairness, I think were okay finishes. Leno is just such a good goalkeeper. So Fernandes owners, you can feel incredibly hard done by. Matoma was really impressive. The forgotten man, the 6.5 million mid that we potentially should have gone for. Obviously, the opening 3 fixtures looked pretty rough on paper, but Everton were absolutely shocking, and Matoma was brilliant. I also think Minte was very good, by the way. He went off. I don't think it was an injury. I think it was like a concussion protocol thing, so he could be a really decent shout. But Matoma in particular, exceptional. He had the highest XG of the game week thus far. And then Souček played quite an advanced role for West Ham, who created tons of chances themselves. So there we go. 3 interesting midfielders that all accumulated over 1 XG. The only player that managed even close to 1 XA, which is expected assist, in Game Week 1 was actually Trent. Trent managed exactly 1 expected assist in Game Week 1. So he deserved at least 1 assist, because not often a player will get that much expected assist in a single game. The next closest was Minte, who I just spoke about, with 0.65, despite getting an early sub, obviously. He looks like a player that will absolutely be suited to the Premier League from that very short cameo that we saw. So he could potentially be at some point the 5.5 million midfielder of choice. HAVERTZ, a player that obviously performed so incredibly well in Game Week 1, him and Souček had the most shots in the box in Game Week 1 with 5. So again, Souček not only getting crazy XG, but 5 shots in the box, followed by Salah, Matoma, Armstrong, and Saka with 4. So a lot of players getting lots of shots in the box, but HAVERTZ in particular, the only concern with HAVERTZ was the minutes. I just think his minutes will still be pretty good. I do think he'll get the odd early sub, or he might be brought into midfield if Jesus comes on. But he just can't not start when he's been as impressive as he has. He seems to have continued what we saw at the back end of last season. So HAVERTZ definitely on the watch list. Then we move on to some team data. So only 3 teams had more than 2 XG actually in Game Week 1. Maybe you would expect slightly more in an open Game Week 1. But Liverpool had 2.69, Man United 2.44, and West Ham 2.39. So Liverpool just showing their dominance. I know against Ipswich we would expect that, and maybe that's a positive sign for Man City against Ipswich in Game Week 2. United looked incredibly impressive, and as did West Ham against what is an Aston Villa side that has looked very poor during pre-season, and I wasn't particularly impressed in Game Week 1 either. Interestingly, Southampton had the best defensive data in Game Week 1, and I know people again will point to the red card. I still think they would have been right up there regardless. I know it might have been the case of what happened with Liverpool, where Newcastle had a really shaky first half. They come out in the second half, they look so much better. That could have happened. But do not disrespect Southampton, because during that first half, even before the red card, they were very, very good. So Southampton might be a team that we start to look at in the future. We'll need to see a few more games, though. Arsenal with the second best defence. Are we surprised? They only conceded 0.39 XGC. And Brighton, third best with 0.4. So those 3 defences were very, very solid. Liverpool, despite having a really tough first half against Ipswich, still had the most big chances and the most shots in the box in Game Week 1. Again, does this mean that Liverpool are fantastic, or does it mean that Ipswich will be the fixture to target? Maybe a bit of both. No disrespect to Ipswich, because they did look very good, but they've still shipped 6 big chances and allowed 13 shots in the box, which is quite a lot. So all eyes on Game Week 2. Because if City get that many chances again, maybe we start to look at Ipswich. Whereas if Ipswich gives City a hard time in Game Week 2, and Liverpool absolutely smash it against Brentford, maybe we just look at that Liverpool attack and go, we want 2 or 3 of them. So it could be a really nice option to go for that double up in the attack if you're not already on it. And then just in regards to 3 teams that actually conceded 0 big chances in Game Week 1, Manchester United, Liverpool, and Brighton. So 3 teams that you might potentially want to look at for the future. Now, again, Game Week 1, 1 game sample size, doesn't mean a whole deal. But over the coming game weeks, I'll update this and we'll start to look at trends. But for now, some interesting stats for you. So guys, moving on to Game Week 2, of course, later in the week, I'll have my own team selection. I'll have a deadline decisions, Game Week preview, deadline stream. There'll be so much more content throughout the week. But this is just an early look. And I'm honestly really, really happy with my team for Game Week 2. The glaring omission is that I have absolutely no Man City asset. So, of course, it would be lovely to have a Man City asset against Ipswich at home. And then they actually have 2 decent fixtures in Game Week 3 and Game Week 4 as well. So I absolutely will consider the possibility of bringing in a Man City player. But if I'm suddenly like, oh, I need to bring in a City player, well, I should have just started with one, right? Nothing has really changed in my mind. I thought Ipswich would be a good fixture. I thought City would look good, and I think they largely did look very good against Chelsea. They also didn't create that many chances, by the way, against Chelsea. Their XG wasn't particularly high, but I knew, of course, that I would ideally like one, but I chose the other assets that I have instead. Maybe the slight frustration for me, although I've not yet seen Porro play, by the way, is that I made a last-minute decision on the deadline stream to go for Porro instead of Gvardiol, which is why above me you can see I have 0.5 million in the bank because I chose Porro rather than Gvardiol. So maybe that was a slight mistake. I was just slightly spooked by the fact that Walker wasn't likely to start. Rodri hadn't even had any team training at all. And I just thought there's no guarantee that Rodri and Walker are even back for Game Week 2. And if that's the case, I'm expecting Gvardiol to play as like a left centre-back, which in all honesty is exactly what he played against Chelsea. He just happened to be very good for bonus points as well, and obviously they got the clean sheet. So a little bit frustrating, maybe a slight mistake for me there, but I am very happy having Pedro Porro. The only other way I could get a City asset is in that midfield. I could bring in Foden or KDB, or I break the team to bring in Haaland, but you guys will know that I'm not going to do that because I'm still happy with my plan. Outside of that, the team's looking really strong. Like I said, I've got triple Liverpool still against Brentford at home. Brentford were good, but they definitely conceded chances, so I could see Liverpool having some joy there. And obviously it's at Anfield as well, and we know how strong Liverpool are at Anfield. So I'm perfectly happy having Trent, Salah and Jota. I would expect all 3 of them to start again. We might see early subs for any of them. Potentially for Salah, Elliott can come on the right, or Diaz can go out there. For Trent, Bradley has looked incredibly good. And obviously we know Jota could come off for Gakpo or Darwin. So maybe their minutes aren't super secure, but at the moment, I'd expect all of them to start. I'm okay and pretty happy with my double Crystal Palace in Henderson and Eze. A little bit unlucky not to get points off Eze. I don't think they were brilliant defensively. I'm not necessarily expecting a clean sheet for Henderson here, but I am perfectly happy having the pair of them. NKUNKU could be a big worry for me in midfield if he continues to get limited minutes. Is there a chance that he doesn't start every game now? He's definitely a position in my team, especially with 0.5 in the bank. I can bring in any 6.5 even if they go up. I could potentially look to the 7 million mids. And Burmo, if he doesn't go up, is an option there. So I've got lots of options with that NKUNKU spot. I don't have to keep him long term. Double Arsenal, I'm fine with. Again, I knew that they had tricky fixtures. If all of a sudden I'm looking at this now and going, Villa away, I don't want to have them. But is Villa away even a difficult fixture at the moment with the way they've had pre-season and started the season? I'm expecting Arsenal to dominate there, in all honesty, based on what we saw from West Ham. We know that Arsenal set up a little bit more defensively away, so maybe this isn't a perfect fixture for Bukayo Saka, but Gabriel, Arsenal were actually better defensively in the last 2 seasons. The season before last, they were much better away from home. They just find a way. I think it's the way that Arteta sets them up in a more pragmatic format in their defence. So I really like Gabriel. But I do have the option on the bench to start Robinson instead, right? He's got Leicester at home. So I would love to know down below in the comments, Gabriel, Porro, Trent, Robinson. You've got to bench one of them. Who would you bench? I don't think anyone would bench Trent in their right mind because it's Trent. Porro, based on how Everton looked against Brighton, that actually looks like a really good fixture now. And also Porro's very attacking. Let's see how they get on against Leicester on Monday. But I don't think I want to bench Porro against Everton at home. So I think it is probably between Gabriel and Robinson. But as I just said, I think Arsenal just so good defensively. I think I start Gabriel. And Robinson did look really good against Manchester United. He got forward a lot, but Fulham didn't look great defensively. Let's see again how Leicester look on Monday, because if Leicester look really blunt in their attack, it might tempt me to go for Robinson. But I'd love to know down below in the comments, who would you start out of Gabriel and Robinson? So who's left to discuss? Isak, obviously absolutely fine having him. He's owned by basically everyone, so he doesn't excite me because I don't really care what he does, because everyone in my mini leagues and all of the other content creators and everyone that I'm competing with, they all have Isak. So it doesn't really bother me what he does. Maybe over time I look to move on Isak to someone like a Havertz for that reason and go against the ownership. But for now, I still think Isak's a fantastic pick. And Solanke, I don't know how he does in Game Week 1. I don't even know if he'll start in Game Week 1 because that fixture has not yet happened. But I'm very happy having him. If he doesn't start and gets really limited minutes, I do have that question in my mind of whether I move him straight to a Havertz or if I go for someone else in that spot, maybe even like a Chris Wood or a Muniz. I've got loads of options. João Pedro, if he continues to start. I could downgrade him, but as long as he looks fit and available, and I think he'll start in Game Week 2, I'm hesitant to remove him as early as this. So, I mean, I genuinely still think that 11 is amazing. No one there has an awful fixture. No one there was so bad in Game Week 1 that I desperately want to remove them. It's just the glaring omission of no Man City. So how much damage will I be on the end of not having Haaland and not having someone like a Gvardiol? All I need Salah to do is return. Even if Salah only gets 7 or 8 points, but Haaland gets 13 to 17, well, then I'm just basically back on track with those that I did slightly better than in Game Week 1, right? And then I go into Game Week 3 with another team that I think looks really, really good. So let's see what happens. Stranger things have happened than someone like Salah outscoring Haaland when Salah's got Brentford at home and Haaland's got Ipswich at home. So, I mean, I don't expect that. I am very nervous. I am very scared. And of course, I would love to own Haaland. But I guess what I'm saying is there's no chance at the moment of me breaking my team to bring Haaland in. And to be honest, I can't see myself moving for any City players. So let's now take a look at what my current watch list looks like. Who are the players that I'm currently considering for Game Week 2 and beyond? And is there a chance that I bring any of them in for this game week? So guys, as you can probably imagine, I am leaning towards, of course, trying to roll a transfer in Game Week 2, but I need to remind myself, and I plead that you remind me as well, rolling isn't always a good thing. I think in something like Game Week 2, it often is if you're happy with your team, but I can imagine that I will find myself at various points this season getting overly carried away with trying to roll transfers because you can now roll up to 5 and being too patient. There will absolutely be points, especially early in the season when you can catch price rises, where being aggressive and bringing in players that are in form will actually serve you quite well. So I do not want to get into a spot now where I never make transfers. I'm always rolling. I'm playing boring FPL. We do not like boring FPL on this channel, so please continue to remind me. So with that in mind, here are some players that I'm currently considering. So in the defense, I'm really happy with my defense, but of course, I have 0.5 in the bank. I have Porro, so Gvardiol is on my mind. He is a player that if he doesn't rise up to 6.1, Porro to Gvardiol in Game Week 2, whilst I don't really want to use a transfer on that, I could absolutely see that paying off. And obviously, we know how good Gvardiol is, and once Walker's back, if Gvardiol starts to bomb on more, and it's not actually Rico Lewis is the one doing it on the right-hand side, Gvardiol will only continue to be a fantastic option at 6 million. So he is definitely on my mind. Mazraoui looked so good for Man United. Not necessarily the most attacking, but he did a lot of things that will be good for bonus points. Fouls won. He won a load of fouls. Successful tackles, interceptions. He looked incredibly good on the ball and defensively as well. So I think Mazraoui will continue to start for Man United, and as a result, at 4.5 million, Mazraoui could be a really decent shout, but I don't really need a 4.5 million defender at the moment. And then just a shout out to Munoz and Mitchell. Both of them were incredibly attacking against Brentford. They're playing as two wing backs, but basically as wingers. Munoz is basically a winger. He also took 2 corners today for Crystal Palace as well. So Munoz is someone that I kind of do wish I'd gone for Raya and Munoz rather than Henderson and Gabriel, but of course that's hindsight. I didn't do that. But Munoz at 5 million, he's definitely a player that's on my list, as is Anderson, by the way. That man can ping a pass. If you watch the Palace game, he was just pinging passes for fun. So I still like the Crystal Palace defence, but I guess I've got Henderson in there. I'm not desperate to bring in a Munoz or an Anderson. The midfield is where it's really at, I think, because I've got NKUNKU in there, and I've got Eze in there, who the rumours are he could still potentially be off. So I've got a couple of spots that I'm slightly more happy changing. Mbeumo, unbelievable. I mean, I've got Mbeumo and Matoma on this list. It feels like we're in last season. Those were the two that we were deciding between for Game Week 1 last year. But Mbeumo should be on penalties. Looks like Tony's off, maybe to Saudi. If not, there are rumours that United could be putting in a last-minute bid for him. But I think Mbeumo will be on pens now. He's the talisman for Brentford, and his data is always unbelievably solid. So I look at Mbeumo as an option, and I just think, do you know what? I really like him. And at 7 million, when the fixtures improve, he could be fantastic. They do have a really decent fixture, I think, in Game Week 3 now, Brentford, but I don't really want him for the Liverpool game. It's actually from Game Week 6 that I'll be looking at Brentford in particular, because that's when their fixtures start to improve. But Mbeumo is definitely on the radar, as is Matoma. Now, similar issue, Matoma now has Manchester United and then Arsenal in the next 2. So the fixtures don't really align for me to have Matoma now. If I wanted him, I should have had him in Game Week 1. So I know it looks like I'm just picking players that have scored points, but those two are obviously on my radar after a very impressive Game Week 1. Bernardo Silva also there. I have a feeling that with everyone returning late and Pep having new players that he's trying to integrate, he could just rely on Bernardo Silva for the first 5 to 6 game weeks. We've seen this in the past where Pep wants to integrate new players slowly and he's not really sure what position to play certain players when others are injured, and he'll find those players where he just trusts them inherently. And I think Bernardo Silva is one of those. He played a much more defensive role than we're used to in the game against Chelsea. However, he still got forward. He obviously had the assist as well. And I thought it was very, very impressive. So I think there's a good chance he starts Ipswich. And obviously, if that's the case, I could do something like NKUNKU to Bernardo Silva to give me some Manchester City cover in that game. Another City player that I'm interested in, of course, is Phil Foden. He did get minutes off the bench at halftime for Man City for Savinho because of the injury. Do I expect him starting Game Week 2? I kind of do now because he got enough minutes in Game Week 1. So that is a possibility as well. I could try and bring in Phil Foden, but for me, that would be for Bukayo Saka. And I'm just not sure I want to do that at the moment. And Smith Rowe, I know he blanked in Game Week 1, but I was really impressed with the positions he was picking up. I know he didn't get a lot of minutes, but I did say this ahead of Game Week 1, that we're not expecting him straight away to play 90 every single game. You have to expect the possible early subs. And from what I saw, he's going to get into some good positions and Fulham will score goals. They've got Leicester and Ipswich next. Smith Rowe is still absolutely on my radar, as is his teammate Muniz. And I still think that I would like a Fulham attacker ideally for the next couple of fixtures. I feel very naked and bare not having a Fulham attacker. I know I've got Robinson that I could play, but I think Fulham will score goals across the next 2 games. So it would be nice to have one of those. And then obviously Kai Havertz, unbelievably good in Game Week 1. Last season, I think from Game Week 25 or 26 onwards, he only blanked twice. He had some of the highest goals in the league from that period as well. Since he's gone to the number 9, Havertz has been not only brilliant, but elite. He's been one of the best FPL assets you can own. And he's still incredibly cheap. And I think he'll increase in price very, very quickly. But even if he gets up to 8.5, he still feels like okay value. So I've got my eye on Havertz. Could be for Solanke, although I think I'll run out of money to do that very soon. Could be for Isak as well. I just wonder whether now is the time to do it. Against Villa away, could I wait until Game Week 3 when they play Brighton? Or maybe until Game Week 6 when they have Leicester and then Southampton in consecutive weeks? So Havertz is absolutely on my radar. And if I have an opportunity to bring him in, I will. It's just, again, a lot of these just I like the look of, but it's only been one game. You can't overreact. And a lot of them also are about to go into either just a tricky fixture in Game Week 2 or consecutive tricky fixtures in sort of 2, 3 and 4. So a lot of these feel like wait and sees, but there are also some really exciting picks. I'd love to know down below who is currently in your watch list for Game Week 2. So guys, I thought I would just jump over to Fantasy Football Hub and take you through my team for the next few game weeks and maybe discuss when I might want to make potential moves in my team. If you would like to get access to this, you can actually get a team rating now for free still. So if you want to upload your team and see what it is rated for the upcoming game weeks, you can absolutely do that. There'll be a link down below. But also they are still offering for the next week or so, I think, I don't know how long it will last, 50% off if you want access to all of the features that I use in these videos. So the ability to plan ahead and look at your team for future weeks is so critical and important, but also get AI recommended transfers, predicted points, Opta stats, expert team reveals. There is so much on this site, player comparisons, price changes, by the way. When price changes happen, they can predict them. If you want access to all of that, there is a link down below to get 50% off. It works out as £3.25 per month. You can get access to all of the fantastic stuff on this site. I absolutely think it's worth doing, and do it now at the start of the season where you get the most use out of it as well. So do check out that link. So that's what I'm using here right now. I'll switch it to predicted game week 1 just so that it's easier for you to see. So game week 2, team looks good. If we want to know what the AI thinks between Gabriel and Robinson, by the way, 4.2 predicted points for Gabriel, 3.8 for Robinson. So they clearly think that Gabriel is the one to start, and I am inclined to agree at the moment. In terms of players that have low predicted points for this week that they would suggest maybe aren't perfect, Gabriel is one of them, but also Henderson. But generally, I'm predicted to get almost 70 points this week, so it could be another decent week. You never know, do you? I mean, I don't own Erling Haaland, but it could be okay for me. Game week 3, it's a bit of a stinker, to be entirely honest. My team doesn't look particularly good because obviously Chelsea play against Palace, so I've got a bit of a clash there. I've got United against Liverpool. I don't own United assets, but that's not a perfect fixture for Liverpool. I've also got Pedro Porro against Newcastle, Solanke against Newcastle, Isak against Spurs. So I looked at this, and this obviously doesn't look like a great week. I do have the option, though, of bringing on Robinson against Ipswich for potentially Pedro Porro. So if I click on Pedro Porro there, I think that's probably what I will do there. And obviously at this point, I'm going to have 2 free transfers if I don't use one this week. So I've got the option of what do I want to do with this team? Obviously, if NKUNKU doesn't feature in Game Week 2 or again has limited minutes, this might be a decent time to take him out. And someone that I would be looking at for NKUNKU is potentially someone like Bailey. I could go a little bit early on a Brighton asset, but it doesn't feel like the best week to do it against Arsenal. So I've got options there, but something like NKUNKU to Bailey is an option. Also, this is now when obviously Ollie Watkins will go into his nice run of fixtures. If he looks a little bit better and Villa doing Game Week 2, he is someone on my radar as well. It could be at this point, like, let's say City win like 9-0 against Ipswich. I'm like, I've realised the error of my ways. I'd like a City asset. I could absolutely do that as well. But I also don't want to panic. I speak about this all the time, that your team can't look perfect on paper every single week. And just because your team doesn't look great in a week doesn't mean it won't perform well. Some people will have an absolutely stinky team on paper that outperforms a team that has all home fixtures against newly promoted sides. It can happen. So I wouldn't panic too much if in a single week the fixtures don't look perfect on paper. Going into Game Week 4, it then looks much better again. Most of my team have really good fixtures. The only slight clash that I have is Arsenal against Spurs. At this point, again, though, I don't have to start Pedro Porro because I've got Robinson. And if people were wondering why I chose Robinson and Porro, it's for this nice rotation. In the 2 weeks that I don't want to play Porro in particular, Robinson has okay fixtures. Outside of that, I can't predict what my transfers are going to be, but I do have my eye on Jota eventually might become an issue. Solanke might be someone that I want to move to someone like HAVERTZ. And also in NKUNKU, I could imagine me moving, or maybe Eze, to another 6.5 or 5.5 million pound midfielder. So there we go. I'm not going to look much beyond that because I don't think there's much use at the moment. But if you do want to get access to Fantasy Football and you want to go through every week and work out what your changes and transfers might be, absolutely be willing to do it. And as I said, price changes as well. Not only can you look at them on a separate page, but you can look on your own team and work out when your players might go up or down in price, which allow you to build up that team value early. So there will be a link down below in the description. Yeah, let me know what you think of my team for Game Week 2. Will I really regret not having Erling Haaland, or do you think I'll get away with it? And also, how many points are you on for Game Week 1 as well? So guys, there you have it. Those are some initial thoughts around Game Week 1 and some early transfer plans ahead of Game Week 2 and beyond as well. If you did enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button. And if you've got to this point and you're not yet subscribed, please do consider doing so. But until next time, thank you very much. Bye-bye.